Hello and welcome to episode 263 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, penguin poo could be cooling the planet. And somehow it's not because they shoot ice cubes out their cute little butts.
Which they totally do. But not so fast, penguins. A new plan is taking shape that could refreeze Arctic sea ice. All it will take is $10 billion and thousands of undersea drones. The plan will take the pressure off penguins to save the planet, all by their adorable selves.
The Telegraph says EV fires are on the rise. Is this true? No! Fire in my veins is definitely on the rise, unfortunately, though.
There's a new technology that can help apprehend thieves who like to steal the cables on electric car chargers. This technology is so secret we don't actually know what it is. Although you would think thousands of volts of electricity would be enough of a deterrent, but apparently it's not.
All that, the new Pope, and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
All right, so I'm back. We had a week off. Did you enjoy your time off? It was kind of like summer.
I would like to thank our listeners for their patience, because I really enjoyed not working for a week and tending to my yard and things. I realized that I put a lot of effort into this show. I think about one topic way too much. And it was nice to have a reset, and we'll be doing it again, I'm sure, in the summer once or twice as well. I'll have to skip a week or two for various reasons. Yeah, thank you. It was nice to have that time off.
Yeah, and I'm back. I did have to spend a couple of days in the hospital. Of course, I had some minor surgery. Everything went totally fine. There was no issues. And of course, I'm very grateful for the miracles of modern medicine, but holy crap, spending 2 days in the hospital is incredibly boring.
So 48 hours type of thing? What are we talking here?
Approximately that. And I got caught up on all the podcasts I listened to, which is
a first.
Very difficult to do. But, 2 days in the hospital, that's about all you could do, really.
Did you run out? Were you wanting more?
I did. I ran out and I had to switch to, sort of watching things on streaming services. But yeah, they have Wi-Fi. They don't seem to have TVs in hospitals anymore. I was kind of wondering if they still did that, where you could rent a television. I might have watched some TV sports or something like that. But no, they have Wi-Fi, so you have your phone, and that's how you survive.
Okay. Well, you showed me your breakfast. It was very disappointing. Did you get enough to eat while you were there?
Yeah, I sent a quick video to James, the first morning breakfast. They have one of those platters with a lid on it, like you have like hotel room service.
And my thought was, there's an amazing breakfast in there.
Well, exactly. And I opened it up. There was a single piece of dry toast inside.
Dry toast? I didn't even know it was dry.
No, it was sort of tough and hard to chew. So
that's the saddest thing ever.
The next morning, the piece of toast came with some scrambled eggs, at least.
Dry still, but scrambled eggs?
Yeah. But then I think I had the first morning that was cereal was the main food, and then a little fruit cup. So There was other food besides the dry toast.
How are you supposed to get on the mend with that sort of thing in your diet? They should be filling you up with a buffet.
It's a hospital food is a weird thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. So the other thing I wanted to talk about quickly at the off the top here, we'd love to talk about airports, because it seems like there's huge potential at airports to do lots with solar power, particularly. And it was Pittsburgh we were talking about a few weeks ago. The Pittsburgh airport was doing a lot. Mm-hmm. And Zurich, I'm going to talk about this week. I feel like we've maybe talked about them before. Zurich seems very interested in greening their airport. It seems like a few of these airports have kind of realized that they're in a very carbon-intensive industry. So the smart airports are doing as much as they can to at least green the airport operations. Flight, of course, is going to take several more years. But anyway, it was a nice piece from Electrek. Solar fences is what they're going for. We've talked about this before. As the cost of solar panels drops, it now becomes a material you can build fences out of. So they're doing a lot of rooftop solar. But now, it's like, well, we're going to put these fences up anyway. Well, why not make them solar fences? And that's what they did.
So if you draw a rectangle around airport runways that run usually in two different directions, slightly variations to take advantage of the wind, that is a long perimeter that has fences on it.
Yeah.
If you put solar on that fence, that would seem like a pretty good opportunity. I mean, there's lots of vacant land that doesn't have, the runway on it, and they have to mow that and put things there to keep the birds away. Seems like a good opportunity.
Yeah.
As long as they're all facing south, right?
Yeah, well, it's because the cost is dropping, the orientation matters less, and these are double-sided solar panels, so you're getting a little bit from both sides. I guess to orient them north-south would probably be the best, so you get lots of east sun and lots of west sun.
Of double-sided panels, you can do the east, the fence that runs north and south and faces east and west. That can be done as well, and you'll get some in the morning, some in the evening as well.
Yeah.
So, Brian, I'm glad you didn't read this on Patreon, but all of our Patreon subscribers and supporters, and even the free ones, had access to a little blog post I did on the weekend. I was minding my own business on Sunday afternoon. I was gardening and doing some things in the yard, lots of little repairs and things. And it was a beautiful day. I had all the screen doors open, and the air was flowing through my house. And then I heard an explosion.
Not again.
Yeah, an explosion. And I've realized that I've never heard an explosion before in real life.
Oh, okay.
Have you? I mean, what blows up for you?
I guess not, but there's been other explosions at the refinery, which I'm assuming was the explosion. But I guess you didn't hear any of those.
No, and the funny thing is, it wasn't the refinery. I live a kilometer and a half, like half mile from a refinery or something like that, maybe a mile. And there's been explosions there. There was one 8 weeks ago. And when there is an explosion there, it's bad, of course, but everyone in, half the city seems to hear it. I get reports from friends on Facebook and things that are, practically down where you live, hearing these explosions, but not me. And the thing is, they happen at night, and I've got, a lot of sound makers and fans going in my bedroom to keep me cool. And so I
have one of those explosion generating white noise machines.
Yes, just so it blends in.
Right.
But I shat myself. I thought, okay, that's the refinery. The wind is coming from that general direction. So if there is toxic gases that would follow suit, I better check this out to see what's going on. So the first thing I did is I alerted my family. My daughter was sleeping. It was the middle of the day, and my wife was in the shower, and I got everyone together. And then I went out to the backyard to see if I could see smoke from the refinery, and I did not. I turned in the other direction, and I saw a large plume of black smoke coming from, I guess, west of me. And the first thought I had was there was an Esso gas station at the intersection of the highway and the freeway there. And I thought, I wonder, that must be it. But gas stations generally don't explode, do they? I mean,
generally
there's safety precautions in place. And around in North America, you never hear of it unless there's something really negligent going on. And then I wondered if maybe a home exploded because, sometimes around here, like there's a natural gas leak, and it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
But I would argue it probably happens more than gas stations exploding.
Yeah.
But I couldn't figure out what it was because it was a loud explosion. Okay. And I couldn't figure out what it was, but I saw people I live on a boulevard that goes on for another 3/4 of a block before it comes to a dead end, and there's a highway there. And I saw people gathering over there to look. So I put the family in the car and drove over there. My daughter walked and met her over there. And we could see it was a vehicle fire. We could see a tanker truck right behind it. So I thought, okay, tanker truck. A tanker truck exploded. Well, it didn't. Long story shorter, it was a pickup truck that started on fire, and the gas tank exploded very loudly. Or it was a propane tank on the truck or something like that, or there was a welder, but there was a big explosion. But I think it was the gas tank because there was so much black smoke from burning gasoline that you would see in like a tanker fire or something somewhere. And the police closed down the whole area. They didn't say why. They've never said why. They don't tell the media anything anymore.
Yeah.
And that was what it was. So we went to a different location where we could get a closer look. And I saw this charred out, remains of a vehicle. Well, I couldn't tell what it was. And then I thought, oh my God, is there going to be a body in there, a charred body? My daughter and wife are going to be looking at, and me, or all going to be traumatized. And then, so I quickly I unblocked this website, from this garbage bin company in our city that is the news source for things, but they're kind of unethical or a little bit racist sometimes. And I don't like them. And I heard about them through my kids. So I unblocked them on Twitter, and I kept refreshing to see what they would have, because they always have stuff like this. And yeah, so somebody had posted the fire before it had started. It was a large black, I don't know if it was a F-150, but it was a Ford, maybe it was a 250 or something. It was a bigger pickup truck. And there was a pool of fire underneath of it. So it could have been a fuel fire that sort of spilled onto the ground, pooled, and then lit the gas tank on fire is my theory.
Yeah.
Because they were parked off the road and there was a little bit of grass there. It was completely toast, and the fire was out by the time that I got there. But of course, this leads us to our discussion of this massive fear of EV fires, which is in the news again this week, which is completely bogus. And I've talked about seeing many car fires in my life. You have too, right? I mean, you've seen some around.
I've seen at least one, maybe two.
I've probably seen 8, something like that. More than a half a dozen, less than a dozen. And, one was on the highway recently I saw, and one was on the way to pick up my kids from school on the freeway there. Don't know why, but cars start on fire. And I ran the stats on this, and there's nearly 6,000 a year in our province of 1.2 million people, 1.1 million people.
Wow.
6,000 car fires per year. So I worked it out what it would be in our city, because we're 250,000 population in the greater area here. And it's about almost 4 per day in our city.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is crazy. And yet people say, don't buy an EV. It'll burn you up. Well, don't buy a freaking gas car because odds are you'll go up in flames. Many times more greater.
Wow.
So these gas fires are decreasing at a steady rate. So it's not, a statistical anomaly. There is a steady rate of decline. So and they tend to happen in older cars. So this car seemed, because they had the footage of the before, as it was just starting on fire, and a video, it looked like it was fairly new. It didn't look like it was terribly old. But gas leaks happen in the fuel system. They hit the engine and ignite, and you're toast. And get this, Brian. My daughter said, like an hour later, there was another car fire in our city. Another one that was on this social media feed. So that proves that there was 2 in that day, and possibly 4 in the whole day, the 2 that were documented. So yeah, there's a story that was in the Telegraph just now, and it says EV fires, this is in the UK, are up 77% in the last couple of years, and they called it doubling. And yet the UK is steadfast at the 2035 gas car ban, they said, even with all these EV fires. But that's because EVs on the road actually doubled in that time, so the rate of fires is actually going down, but they didn't, come out and say, this is the reason why. They mentioned it in the story, but they didn't put the 2 things together. They're up 77% because EVs are up, over 100%.
Yeah.
On the roads. And yeah, EVs fires can actually happen in new cars, and it doesn't happen very often. It happens sometimes in accidents, and sometimes because of a faulty battery, and sometimes that happens sooner than later. So if you have a car that's a few years old, chances are your risk is gone. But yeah, so they've said all kinds of nasty things in there. And of course, there's different studies that have looked at this, but it's anywhere from, 5 to 7 times less likely to have a fire in an EV, all the way up to 29 times. The more recent studies have been higher, more rare that because the EVs are probably improving, I'm guessing. They're safer than they were in the first iteration, and there's more of them on the road now. But Motor Trend, the combustion vehicle magazine, said that combustion-powered vehicles are 29 times more likely to catch fire. 29 times more likely. And yet, I could go at my front door and find someone in 2 minutes that would say EVs are going to go on fire.
Yeah, easily.
And you shouldn't buy one. It wouldn't take me 2 minutes to find a person who thinks that. So it's wrong, and it's actually shocking how much gas fires are common, how common they are. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. And that explosion was so loud that you could hear it. I'm surprised it was that loud.
It scared the shorts off me, for God's sake. Like, it was really loud. And it was probably a half kilometer, 500 meters away from me as the crow flies. So it wasn't that far away. But I've never heard, I've seen all these fires. I've never seen it blow up. And apparently cars don't blow up. I researched it. They don't, the car fires don't cause explosions usually. But I think this was a special case because he was parked over grass. It was windy. It was dry. He could have started a grass fire if he was out of town.
Well, and I blew up a car one time for a documentary that I was making. And we hired this guy who was a demolitions expert. You need to hire somebody with that kind of thing. And he set it up on private property, and he had a wire that would, spark it to set it off. But the main way that he created the actual explosion, because we wanted a nice, pretty firebomb, is he just put, cans of gasoline basically in the back seat of the car. So when those go, you get a really great fireball, but it doesn't actually have that much force behind it. And I don't remember it being loud either, but I imagine the gas tank exploding is probably what's louder.
Yes, because it's a confined, constricted place. I don't know if you used the same effects guys we did on, what was it, Bad Cops.
Probably, yeah.
So it was like one of those plastic containers that you would have water in for camping that collapses. They filled with gasoline and a pyrotechnic ignited that. And yeah, there's no explosion because there's nothing confining it. But this exploded, and it must have been a pretty full gas tank from all the smoke too. It burned for a long time, a lot of smoke. And then there was further subsequent explosions, Brian, that weren't as loud. Those were the pyrotechnics and the airbags, which went up.
Yes, and I remember him telling that when we blew up my car. He said at a certain point, the airbag thing is going to blow up as well. And then sure enough, bang, it was...
That's probably more dangerous because it is actually an explosion that takes place. But anyway, there's also pyrotechnics in seatbelts. Seatbelt tensioners have pyrotechnics in it that tighten them in an accident. And in an electric car, you have them to disconnect the high voltage battery from the rest of the system. There's a pyrotechnic that goes off. Instead of a fuse, it blows. So in the same way. Oh,
and it was cool. We did blow out the windshield of the car, blew out when it went off, which was sort of surprising. But I think it was probably like an aftermarket windshield replacement that was maybe not that well secured. But the windshield did blow out.
Oh, nice. That's always a good result.
It looked great.
So my wife works with kids at a nonprofit, and they got a incubator, and they hatched a bunch of chicken eggs.
Oh, cool.
So we went to visit them on the weekend because we had to look in on them, and we held them in our hands, and they were cute and scared and pecky. And we had chicken dinner that night by coincidence. But
okay. That's just rude.
It is rude, but yes, they were there. And 4 of the chickens were deformed, and one of the quote-unquote farm girls at the work, which refers to herself as such, put them in a freezer and killed them slowly that way. So,
okay, why are we talking about this?
I don't know. I just I want fake food to come. The real world is too cruel. It's too much for me. I want engineered meats to take over and be a sustainable and ethical way to eat food. So vegetarians out there, take note. I'm with you. I'm just not quite with you yet.
All right. Every once in a while, we like to talk about geoengineering stories on the show. It's a controversial topic. But this article from Scientific American I thought was really quite interesting and quite in depth. Just came out this week. And it's about trying to refreeze Arctic sea ice. And these are experiments that are going on in northern Canada. And the idea being that Arctic sea ice is one of the things that actually keeps the planet cool, because you have all this ice cover, and ice cover, snow cover reflects the sunlight back into the atmosphere. Whereas if the sea ice eventually disappears, and they're expecting it to disappear like within the next 15 years, unfortunately, then not only is that gone, so it can't reflect the sunlight back, but the ocean water then absorbs way more energy, and then the whole global warming cycle just is going to kind of accelerate.
So scientists call that a feedback loop in climate warming. And it means when one thing happens, something else happens that's even worse. And it gets worse and worse from there. It creates more feedback loops.
Yeah. So the idea of these experiments, and it's a company called Real Ice, that if we were ambitious about trying to expand the ice cover, we might actually be able to delay or prevent the sea ice from disappearing completely, which is what they're expecting to happen in the summer at some point. And then once it's gone, it's to bring it back in any meaningful way is going to be nearly impossible. So it's a simple idea. The sea ice is typically melting from underneath. It's the ocean water is too warm. It melts from underneath. So what they're doing is they drill a hole in the ice and they put in a pump and they just pump a bunch of the seawater onto the top of this, ice floe or whatever. And then it freezes. Like as long as you do this in the winter when it's cold. And, so far this works. Geoengineering is always, controversial because, you're messing with Mother Nature and none of us really knows the full effects of what would happen if this was deployed on a large scale. And it would have to be deployed on a massive, massive scale to actually make a difference. They're just doing these small kind of pilot projects.
Right.
But what they're saying is they would need 500,000 drones. What they want to eventually do is these would be underwater drones that would swim under the water and then drill from
underwater drones.
500,000. Yeah, this is a $10 billion idea. This is a $10 billion project. There'd be other ways to do it, but this is what they're proposing. They haven't made these drones yet. They're just doing it from above. But the idea is, we need drones to do the work for us because it would be too much work for humans to do. But the idea that drones would, swim under, drill a hole up and,
pump water onto the surface where it's colder. In the winter, it would freeze. The ice gets thicker and less melts in the summer because it gets thicker and thicker artificially. Crazy idea, but maybe not as crazy as putting particles in the atmosphere where you really don't know how that's going to work out.
Yeah, of course, that's been another idea that's been floated. One of the possible problems is microscopic algae. So it says they don't entirely know what's going to happen to the microscopic algae that typically grows on the underside of the ice. This gets eaten by zooplankton, which is then eaten by fish, which is then eaten by mammals. So there is some concern of disrupting the cycle of life if they end up doing something to this microscopic algae. So that part is not clear. And apparently there's other, companies and startups working on this as well. This is an idea that's been floated by a few different people. And, I'm all in favor of kind of big ideas. I mean, this is a climate emergency. We need to do something and we need to do it quickly. So, it would be amazing if it actually worked.
And as much as $10 billion is in things that we speak about worldwide, in the damage that climate causes and in the fight against it, it's a small number. It's not in the trillions. It's just 10 billion. It seems practical. I don't know what the state of these drones, they would all have to be manufactured. And so I guess they're testing it out to see if there's any disruption to the ecosystem, and other people will have to study it. What I'm fascinated by is the fact that it's a company, that this is a for-profit company doing this. What's their game plan? Governments will pay them money after this if they.
Yeah, I think that's basically the idea. They're looking for a large government contract, but probably many governments around the world would need to kind of cooperate on this.
We have a new pope, Brian.
Yeah,
and he's an American pope. So if he comes on the show, we'll be able to understand him better. And of course, Pope Francis, his predecessor, was very much a climate pope. We talked about that in our past show. 10 years ago, Pope Francis signed the encyclical letter Laudato Si, devoted to care for our common home. And it has an extraordinary impact when it was released. There's 1.4 billion Catholics in the world, and people tend to listen to the Pope. It generates a lot of news when the Pope starts talking about the climate, which I think he should, because I look at it from a perspective like if you figure that God created an earth for you, you should not probably be destroying it. You should be taking care of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it had an extraordinary impact, inspiring countless initiatives and teaching everyone to listen to the twofold cry of the earth and of the poor as well. He also included that because, of course, the poor is, impacted even greater than rich people are, or the more wealthy of us in the society, because they are displaced and, can't pick up and leave as well. All kinds of problems. if you're poor and the climate is affecting you, and there's a lot of regions of the world where the climate is affecting poorer regions than richer regions, Robert Francis Prevost is now the 267th leader of the Catholic Church. He has been outspoken about the need for action to fight global warming, according to the College of Cardinals report, a document that offers profiles on dozens of the papal candidates. And Leo has, in the past, warned against the harmful consequences of unchecked technological advancements and aligns closely with Francis's environmental priorities. His profile states, the new pope has spoken out about global warming as recently as November of 2024. So it's on his mind, and he is aligned with his predecessor. During a seminar in Rome dedicated to addressing the problems of the environmental crisis, Leo said it was time to move from words to action on the environmental crisis. He praised efforts by the Vatican to reduce its carbon footprint by installing solar panels and switching to electric vehicles, including the electric Popemobile, which we talked about before on the show. The conference brought cardinals together to discuss the negative impacts climate change imposes on the most vulnerable populations around the world. Prevost also stressed at the time that the need for Catholic Church's involvement in the climate fight is based on social doctrine of the Church, a fundamental framework of social teachings. Humans must engage in a relationship of reciprocity with the environment rather than tyrannical, Leo said. Environmentalists and climate leaders lauded the election of Leo as a pope, who they expect will continue the environmental legacy left by Pope Francis, whom Leo served as a senior advisor. And this is important. Why? Because 1.4 million people in the world are Catholics.
Billion.
And I'm not Catholic, but I listen to the Pope sometimes when the Pope starts talking about things that I know are important to the world. And he generates news, but there's 1.4 billion Catholics who are listening to him. And ironically, the most conservative of them are often in the United States, where there's a political backlash against any climate action right now. But
so 1.4 billion, slightly more listeners than our podcast.
Slightly more, and maybe not as engaged,
Yeah.
But once a week, come to the church of the Clean Energy Show and worship at our altar.
All right, so moving on, Lion Electric School Bus Company. This is a company we've talked about before because we're huge fans of electrifying school buses. Why do we keep sending our kids to school in these filthy, dirty diesel school buses? Well, as we've reported before, they've been having financial troubles in the last while, but it looks like they've been saved a little bit by new regulations in Quebec, their home province. Quebec has reinforced and increased the subsidies for electric school buses in that province. They very much want to electrify 65% of the school bus fleet by 2030 is the plan in Quebec. So there's 11,500 school buses in Quebec. So they're aiming for 65% of those as electric by 2030, which is just 5 years from now. And so they've recommitted and provided $480 million in funding. This will go through 2028. So this was enough for Quebec investors to step in and purchase the company, because it now seems with these guaranteed subsidies that the business is going to be a little bit more secure. They have already made a bunch of permanent cuts to the workforce. They had a plant in Joliet, Illinois that has been closed, and a battery pack assembly site in Mirabel that is also gone, but their main facility in Saint Jerome, Quebec is going to remain, and looking like Lion Electric School Bus is hopefully back on track.
I was a big fan of them. I was even thinking of investing. Of course, that would have been a terrible decision, as all my investing decisions seem to be, but I'm disappointed. Like it seems that this is not an easy thing to do, that these electric school buses are still quite a bit more expensive, and they require large government subsidies to make them work, which is too bad, because I expected the prices of school buses would come down because the batteries would come down, but I think it's still kind of early going. And I haven't heard in China what they're doing there, because there are cities with 100% electric buses for public transit.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard what they're doing for school-age kids, or even if, I don't even know for a fact that they have school buses. I assume they do. But yeah, it's been too expensive for them to make, and it's not on our roads. I did see an electric city bus the other day. I tried to chase it down, Brian. It was too fast. I couldn't catch up to it.
Well, we finally have some. That's great.
Yeah, we have 6 on the roads now, and I want to take one. My only observation is It was fast because I was trying to get a better look as I drove to my daughter's school.
Well, it's got to be pretty great if it's enough to tempt you to take the bus.
Well, yeah, I do want to take it though. I want to do an analysis and see how less noisy they are. And I would like to talk to a driver to see what they think, their first impressions and so forth like that.
What we did was we made measurements nearby a penguin colony, and I specifically had an instrument to measure ammonia. What we saw was that there was considerable emissions of ammonia from the penguin guano that was left behind. What we're seeing is that this ammonia emissions, they have a synergistic role for the formation of particles in the atmosphere. They interact with sulfur species emitted from phytoplankton in the ocean. And when these gases interact with each other, they form new particles. And when these particles then grow large enough, they influence clouds.
Yep, there's a wild twist in the climate science world, Brian. Penguins might be helping to make clouds over Antarctica.
Amazing.
We could call this the polar ice episode of the Clean Energy Show this week because we've got 2 stories on it.
Yeah.
You heard that right. Penguin poop could be cooling the planet. Researchers have found that massive colonies of penguins, like the 60,000 strong Adelie colony they studied in the Antarctic Peninsula, produce huge amounts of guano. Guano, of course, being poop. And that guano gives off ammonia. Ammonia mixes with other gases in the atmosphere and forms tiny particles called aerosols. And warm vapor clings to these aerosols, and boom, clouds start to form from the poo. Who'd have thunk? The scientists at Marambino Station measured ammonia levels near the penguin colony and found that when the wind was blowing from the direction of the birds, ammonia levels spiked to more than 1,000 times the normal background levels. And even after the penguins left, their droppings kept releasing ammonia at levels up to 100 times higher than usual. As ammonia went up, so did the number of aerosols, and soon after, fog, cloud cover, real-time weather changes, all thanks to penguin poop. Now, this research is published in Communications, Earth and Environment, suggests penguins might actually be helping cool parts of Antarctica by seeding low-lying clouds that reflect sunlight, potentially slowing down sea ice melt. And it's a fascinating example of how the natural world can have its own climate-regulating systems. And with scientists still exploring cloud seeding technologies as a way to fight global warming, it turns out penguins might already be trying this way. You know what we should do? Put penguins in the North Arctic, these drones shoot up water and build the ice, but put a few penguins up there too and see what happens. We all want penguins in the North. And by the way,
sure,
9 out of 10 people assume there's penguins in Canada.
In the North as well. But yeah, they're only in the South, unfortunately. But we'd love to have them here in Canada.
I saw them in the Calgary Zoo. They're humorous and adorable and lots of fun.
Yeah. I guess the ones we have in the zoo are the only ones we have. All right. So we've talked about this a few times before. People tend to steal the cables from electric car chargers because these are big, thick, heavy cables that have things like copper in them that turns out are getting more valuable enough that people steal these cables. This is a fairly common thing. So this is from Edmonton here in Canada, from Drive Tesla Canada. It says in Edmonton alone, there's been 169 reports of copper wire theft in 2025 compared to 318 in 2024. The damage has already surpassed $20,000 this year and likely caused millions of dollars of damage to various infrastructure across the city in the last couple of years, given that many incidents go unreported. So, to address the issue, the Edmonton Police teamed up with the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. Who knew that police could cooperate with the Electric Vehicle Association and come out with something here? So they've launched a pilot program using cutting-edge and completely confidential technology at some EV charging stations. And this is amounted to arresting 2 suspects shortly after it was installed. So we don't know what this actually is. I mean, obviously, they probably tried things like security cameras before, and sometimes they have put in like exploding die packs. Like, once you cut the cable, you get an exploding die pack. Like, they put those into bags when bank robberies and stuff as a way to mark. But we don't actually know what this is, and I guess that's a good thing because if we knew what this is, then the thieves would know what it is and be able to defeat it. So I thought this was an interesting
Well, there
development.
could be computer chips in the cables too, but I'm wondering if this is a deterrent, like saying that if you pee in the swimming pool, it will turn blue or something.
Yeah. Sometimes just a deterrent like that is enough to stop people from doing it.
We'll see. It should be interesting because there's been 169 reports of copper theft from these in 2025 so far.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily all from car charging stations, but snipping the cables at car charging stations is a common thing.
When I went and looked at the battery utility substation for supplying lithium battery power to our grid here, and it had, saying there's no copper here, go away, basically, the sign. There's nothing here. But that happens to power utilities, doesn't it? Like it happens with different substations and things where they come in and they take stuff and somehow don't get electrocuted, then they sell it to get, to scrap yards or whatever and get the money for the copper, which is then melted down. And I don't think you get a whole lot of money, but any sort of money is worthwhile. So this podcast is supported by our Patreon members. Sign up today for free and contribute with as little as $1 a month now. We'll be right back with the lightning round. Time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
From the International Energy Agency, global electric car sales rose by 35% in the first quarter of 2025. The growing affordability of electric cars and the vast models now on offer are helping drive this momentum. In China, 2/3 of all electric cars sold last year were cheaper than their conventional ICE counterparts. Not all, but 2/3 were cheaper if you bought the electric version than the gas equivalent. That is from the IEA. The link is there if you want it. Global wheat yields would be 10% higher without climate change. Brian and I live because we live in wheat country. Wheat is everywhere. You go out into the city, there's wheat as far as the eye can see, and then some. So, yeah. And then if you ask a farmer around here, they say climate change isn't real. Well, 10% ain't nothing. BYD, the Chinese car company that only sells electric cars and plug-in electric cars, sold more electric vehicles in the EU, the European Union, in April than Tesla did. So that's a bit of a shift there. BYD has overtaken Tesla in Europe. Hyundai, by the way, Tesla is really suffering in Europe, I think, more than anywhere as far as their sales going down. And I think it's for political reasons. Hyundai is testing robotic EV chargers at an airport in a South Korean city. It's a fairly simple robot, Brian, if you look at the picture, but it is a robot that will guide the charging cable into the port and charge your car for you, so which is good for if you have a robotaxi or if you just don't want to plug in.
I've been waiting for this to happen. And as we've discussed, some car charging cables are super heavy. One of the reasons, that they get stolen, that they have, so many materials in them. But yeah, the CCS ones can be very large and cumbersome. And like the Tesla version 4 are much thicker and much heavier. So it seems like it's probably the future that this just be done.
Some of these
robots.
cables, a lot of them have cooling loops in them to keep them cool, because if they get too hot, you have to reduce the amount of energy going through them. So they have these fluid loops going through the actual cable to take the heat away and disperse it somewhere else. Oh, it's time for a CS Fast Fact. The world's largest electric scooter company is in Yadia, located in China. Brian, it outputs one scooter from its factory every 2 seconds. One electric scooter from one factory every 2 seconds.
That's 10 since we've been talking about
almost as much as there are vehicle fires, which is every 4 minutes in the United States. Interestingly, they're big on sodium-ion batteries, which is interesting because sodium-ion batteries are less energy dense, which means you need a bigger, heavier battery in order to get the same job done. Not with lithium, because it has, the higher energy density. You'd think you would find that in a scooter. So that's an interesting choice. And of course, sodium-ion batteries are improving all the time. China is planning 2 large dams near a disputed border with India. Okay. India fears the dams may be used in a conflict to unleash floods. You get mad at India, you dump a bunch of water on them, and, it's been done. Russia did it. Their conflict with...
I mean, it seems more pleasant than bombs, but still not great.
I don't know that it is. because there's so vast areas could be wiped out. But yes, it's less loud than bombs. To guard against such water bombs, quote unquote, India is planning to build its own massive dam on its side of the border, just in case China decides to unleash their dams that they're building. But the only reason they're building this massive dam, so that's kind of funny. Chinese power generation additions are down 7% January to April. And Brian, that's a good thing because China, the energy capacity is always growing so fast. They're throwing everything out of coal and everything else, the nuclear. Well, apparently it's down 7%, and wind projects are up a whopping 68%. But the shocking thing is that solar is down 34% year on year, and that's because there's been so much solar built that they would rather do other things now. And thermal and gas, I guess anything thermal is coal, gas, anything that creates heat to build electricity is down 71%, which is really good. And this shows that even with, them building the coal plants, it doesn't mean they're going to use them. They're not often using them to their full capacity, and sometimes they're not using them hardly at all. So if hydro keeps up to fairly normal levels this year and there's not droughts, that means that a lot of coal and gas will not be burnt this year. And we'll have more on that later. The Macdonald-Laurier Institute, one of Canada's most influential free market think tanks and pro-oil and gas organizations, stated in an April report that there is currently sufficient pipeline capacity for Western Canadian oil. We hear Alberta politicians say we need to build pipelines in all directions and the federal government should pay for it. Otherwise, we're leaving the country and joining Donald Trump in the United States, becoming the 51st state that no one asked for. So, yeah, they also said that building the pipelines to the Arctic is stupid. It's impractical and it's never going to happen because there's permafrost up there. You have to build roads. It's just really hard to build a pipeline to get up there. That is in dsmog.com. China May NEV retail is at 980,000 units. That is new energy vehicles, which is mostly electric or plug-in electric. And that is up 23% year on year. In May, China's passenger NEV retail sales are expected to be 980,000 units, with the penetration at around 53%. And there's talk of that getting up to 60% or near 60% by the end of the year. And frankly, Brian, I don't know why you wouldn't. If the electric cars are cheaper, the infrastructure is fantastic, there's all kinds of options.
China is moving so quickly, it's putting the rest of us to shame.
The new Toyota RAV4 for 2026, that is a compact SUV, one of their most popular vehicles, will only come as a hybrid or plug-in hybrid. They've gotten rid of the just gas engine component completely. You can't just go out and buy a gas RAV4 anymore. So I thought that was interesting. And there should be a full EV. We both know that. It would be a no-brainer, and that's one of the most popular segments.
Yeah, Toyota is moving super slow to electrify, so this is a small step forward, but obviously there should be a full EV version of the RAV4. That's a very, very popular vehicle. They would sell a ton of them.
Fusion has overtaken fission in April 2025 for the first time ever. Solar power generated more electricity than nuclear power worldwide. That is an important day.
Right. Yes, and that's technically fusion energy because it's coming from the sun, which is a giant fusion reactor in the sky.
And some people argue that wind energy is fusion energy because, the sun heats.
Winds happen because
heating
of
places, hot and cool, changing. Well, that's another argument for another day. 0 new coal plants are planned for the continent of South America. For the first time in history, the entire continent now has 0 new coal-fired plants planned. To grasp how remarkable this is, we need only glance back a decade. When the Paris Climate Agreement was signed in 2015, South America had 18 coal-fired plants on the drawing board. And now, 0.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
And finally this week, new analysis from Carbon Brief shows that China's carbon emissions were down 1.6% in the first quarter of 2025, compared to the same period of last year. And it's down 1% over the last 12 months overall. This time, the drop isn't because of a weak economic growth. Instead, it's thanks to a surge in clean energy. The new wind and solar and nuclear power capacity coming online has been enough to cut back on coal use, even as electricity demand continues to rise. The data, which comes from both official sources and commercial tracking, shows that China's CO2 emissions have now been flat or falling over a year, and that's a big deal. What's even more encouraging is that the growth in clean power is now outpacing both current and long-term electricity demand growth, meaning China is reducing its reliance on fossil fuels. Power sector's emissions alone fell 2% in the 12 months leading up to March 2025. If this trend holds, it could mark a permanent peak in emissions from China's power sector.
It used to be that economies were tied to how many fossil fuel emissions you have, and that is breaking. That's no longer happening, and that is fantastic news. And that's also our show for this week. Please take the time to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Around social media, we're Clean Energy Pod. And of course, you can join our Patreon community for free and get special posts not found elsewhere. That link is in your show notes. And you can support the show with a purchase from the Clean Energy merch store. That is also in the show notes. And if you can, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember to hit the follow or subscribe button for new episodes every week.
Shout out to Clean Club executive members Brent Green Bastard and Brent Routley. Join our Patreon today. You can now do it for as little as $1 a month. You get ad-free episodes, exclusive access to our Discord server, discounts on merch, early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes materials, private updates, thank you credits on our video podcast, and shout-outs on our audio podcast. Thank you all for supporting climate-positive content. We'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.